Welcome to the Private Practice Startup, where we inspire you from startup to mastery. We chat with entrepreneurs, experts in the mental health and business arenas, and successful private practitioners to give you the tools needed to make your dream practice a reality. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, and so much more. Here are your hosts, Dr. Kate Campbell and Katie Lemieux.
Hello, Startup Nation. We are back again for another amazing episode of the Private Practice Startup Podcast. I'm your co-host, Kate Campbell, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hey, everybody, it's Katie Lemieux.
Yeah, so we're co-hosting together.
As always.
As always. And we're really excited to have Michael Feuerman with us today. He is actually the husband of our dear friend, Marnie Feuerman, who was a previous podcast guest expert on episode 23, actually. She talked about how you can build your practice with content marketing. So that's a really cool one to go back and listen to. Welcome, Michael.
Hi there. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kate and Katie.
You're most welcome. We're really excited to have you here. Michael is a commercial real estate broker, and he's going to be talking today about the 10 things you need to know before signing your private practice office lease.
And this actually, Startup Nation was the one that sounded in. And when I posted about what topic they wanted, you guys, this was almost unanimous. So this is actually because you guys wanted this topic.
So if you hadn't already caught our show from last week, we had a great show. It was Katie and I, and it was the round 2 for our private practice ninja tips, tricks, and hacks. It's a tongue twister there.
That is a tongue twister.
Yes, so it was a part 2. We had a duo, so make sure you go back and listen to that if you haven't already heard it. Welcome, Startup Nation. We are excited to have you here. And if this is your first time with us, we're excited to connect. And we wanted to share with you a resource that we have, the A to Z cheat sheet. It's at our website, theprivatepracticestartup.com. Just head over to the resources tab, and there you can download the cheat sheet, the essentials for building your dream private practice. And if you haven't already connected with us on our amazing Facebook group, we have people from around the globe, and we're over 1,000 members at this point and growing every day. And it's a great place for support. So welcome back if you've listened to us before. Let's go ahead and dive in. So Michael Feuerman is here. He's going to be talking about the 10 things you need to know before signing your private practice office lease. Michael, tell us what led you into the business that you're in now.
Sure, absolutely. So from 1993 to 1999, I was a commercial trial lawyer. So I was handling business disputes, a lot of contract disputes, a lot of real estate related litigation. And I really didn't enjoy what I was doing. I didn't want to do it for the rest of my life. It was not the career that I wanted. So I spent a long time, realizing that I really enjoyed commercial real estate, looking for something else to get into that was similar, that was consultative, where I was helping people solve their problems, working on business issues, and commercial real estate brokerage seemed like a really good fit. The niche within commercial real estate brokerage that I focus on is tenant representation. So I represent office tenants, industrial tenants, such as private practice psychotherapy groups that need to lease space, that need to find a building to buy or to lease for their business use. And I thought it was a nice way to utilize the skills that I had developed and continue to be consultative. So it was a long, thoughtful process. My parents weren't happy when I said I'm quitting practicing law, but I was happy, and that's really what matters in the end. I think all the therapists would agree with that.
And what's interesting, and I know I say this a lot of times on our podcast, is, Michael, we really specifically hand select podcast guests who really have some type of connection with our field. And like we had said before, Marnie, your wife, is actually a therapist. And interestingly enough, I had actually visited her new office recently, and she told me how you negotiated her lease. So most often as solopreneurs, most therapists are, there are therapists who have group practices, but probably you are going to be a tenant one day. And it's really important to know the laws, rules, your rights, and things like that. And that's obviously why we're bringing you this podcast. So before we jump into the 10 tips, Michael, what's the best advice you've ever received that relates to building a business or becoming an entrepreneur?
So what I do is very entrepreneurial, because most commercial real estate brokers are 1099 employees. They're independent contractors. They're running their own business within a business. Really, the best thing that you can do early on in your career to make sure that you have a lot of success is find a great mentor. You really need somebody who you respect, who you look up to, who has been successful, who can guide you through. As much as we all know, we don't know everything. There are lots of little tips and tricks that you need to learn, just like what you're doing. You all provide that service as a guide and a mentor to people starting their practice in every field. You really need that. It's crucial.
It definitely is. And, as you're speaking, you said the word independent contractor. And one of the reasons that we reached out to you is because Kate and I, a while back, had created attorney-approved private practice paperwork because we realized a lot of times therapists were going into practice, leaving themselves open and liable for risks. And we recently have created business documents, right? So leasing templates, independent contractor agreements, non-disclosure agreements. So we've created this aspect of our business really to support, again, continued support, rights and responsibilities, really things that you guys need to know to protect yourself. So that kind of what initially inspired this, but also knowing that many therapists are tenants or will be renting office or renting from someone else. So let's jump into those 10 points.
Yes, I'm so excited to hear your 10 things you need to know before signing your private practice office lease. And I am sure I'm, going to learn a lot from this because 6 years ago when I signed my first office lease for a group practice, I definitely could have used you. But now I have you as a connection, which is great. So what's number one?
Okay. So, and these aren't necessarily in order, but these are all, important. And I'll stress them as I get to them, which ones are crucial and which ones are just important. Very important, number one, to realize that not all office buildings are created equal. So, there's obvious differences in office buildings. One can be Class A, one Class B, one Class C. You have to be comfortable with the building that you go to, and you can eyeball it and know by the aesthetics that this is the image that I want. That's number one. But once you get past that, you really need to understand, is this a well-functioning building? Has the owner taken good care of it? Do they keep up with the maintenance? Is it in foreclosure? And if it is in foreclosure, are they going to stop paying for certain things that need to be paid for? Does the building have a very high common area loss factor? So does it have a large atrium inside? Are the elevator lobbies very large? Are the hallways large? If they are, then the common area that every tenant shares the cost of and pays for will drive up your cost. So what's important there is that when you open the door to your suite, you might have 10,000 usable square feet, the usable space that's behind your door. But you're also paying for your portion of the common areas, the hallways, the restrooms, the elevator shaft, the stairwells. That can run anywhere from, on a full floor, 3 or 4% add-on to in an inefficient building, 20% add-on. So whereas you might be using 1,000 square feet, you could be paying for 1,040 or you could be paying for 1,200. It's a big difference because you're paying for that larger number, the rentable. You need to know the difference in buildings. You need to know which one's more efficient than the other. It can save you.
That's a really interesting point. Like I never thought of like the bigger hallways and the lobby in the area, but that's a really cool consideration for someone to make. Not that you should assume like, oh my gosh, it's going to be more expensive, I can't afford this, but knowing that factors in, I think that's a great tip.
Right, because you may be able to get one more subtenant therapist into your space, the same 1,200 square feet that you're paying for could be 160 square feet larger than 1,200 square feet somewhere else. That's a difference between one more therapist paying you rent for the month on a sublease basis. That could be important to you.
For sure.
The second point, what is fair market rent? That's really a moving target. That's going to depend on so many things. So when somebody quotes you rent, do you know if that's a fair amount for that building? Somebody might be, first of all, there's confusion in the marketplace when somebody says to you, my building is $15 a square foot triple net. Someone else says to you, my building is $25 a square foot full service. Well, someone who doesn't understand the difference might say, that's $10 a square foot difference. When in reality, the $15 a square foot triple net might have a $9 CAM add-on factor for operating expenses, and in reality be only $24 a square foot. It might be cheaper. Other people will quote rent as gross rent, which could be net of electric. It could be net of electric and janitorial. You really need to understand and get everybody quoting you apples to apples. So you know that dollar per square foot total amount that you're going to pay for the space. It can become very confusing without some professional guidance. to know what you're really being charged. And you might get a lease one day and then sign it and get an invoice in the mail that's much higher than you thought. You don't want that to happen. You want to prepare ahead of time. The other thing is the full rent that you're being charged. Is it fair in the marketplace? Could you do better at an equally good building around the corner? You're not going to know that unless you shop all the buildings or you have a broker who knows all the buildings and can tell you what's fair.
Yeah, so it's really about doing your market research.
Right. And can you explain to the audience the differences in what you were talking about with CAM and triple net and all that stuff?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Most buildings today, depending on the county, but in Palm Beach County, Broward County, and Miami-Dade County, they quote on a triple net basis. So your rent might be $35 a square foot total. Okay, that's your full service rate. And they might say to you, it's $35 a square foot. Or they might say to you, it's $20 a square foot triple net plus $15 a square foot CAM operating expenses. Okay. Or they might say to you, it's $20 a square foot triple net plus, $12 in CAM plus you pay your own electric and janitorial, which might total to $3 a square foot. However you add it up, it's $35, but there are a lot of numbers running around and you have to know what they are and know what those separately metered numbers are going to be. So if you're in a building where you're paying separately for electric and janitorial, that might be good for you. If you run evening hours, as many therapists do, and you're in a building that doesn't separately meter for electric and HVAC, you may be paying $35 to $50 an hour overtime for HVAC every night. And if you don't know that ahead of time and you get your first bill, you're going to be in for, an eye-opening shock. And, these are the kinds of hidden costs that if you don't know that they're there, you don't know to ask about them, you sign a lease, you're stuck with them for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It can add a lot and take away from your bottom line.
And can you tell our audience what those each mean? What does the net thing mean? What does CAM and HVAC? Yeah,
so again, a triple net number, if your rent is $35 a square foot, that's either $35 full service or $20 triple net base rent plus $15 in CAM and operating expenses.
So what does CAM mean, Michael? What does that mean?
So CAM means common area maintenance.
There you go. Okay, that's what I was just trying to get clarified on so our audience could understand. Got it. Okay.
Right. And then that CAM operating expense might not include electric and janitorial, in which case you're paying for them separately, which in some cases is, a pain for you. In some cases, it's beneficial to you.
Okay. Awesome. I know we have so many, so we're going to move on to the next one. Tell us about number 3.
Absolutely. Oh, and by the way, what rent you pay depends a lot on your credit, how long you've been in business. A startup might get more expensive rent than a therapist who's been in the neighborhood for 20 years, and how much you need the landlord to put into the space, how long of a term you're signing. There are a lot of things that go into it that can drive your rent up or down. So the third point, zoning. Know your zoning. It is critical. This is one of the points that I'm going to tell you is critical. I've seen more than one tenant, not my client, but I've seen more than one tenant sign a lease, realize that the zoning for the building does not allow what they're trying to do and what they want to do there. And the landlord says, I'm so sorry, rent check's due on the 1st. They are not going to feel sorry enough to let you out of the lease. You are stuck with that lease. You then have to buy out or you have to go and sublease to someone else and find yourself a new office. So call the city. If it's in unincorporated portions of the county, call the county, tell them what you do, tell them who comes in, if you're doing drug rehab, if you're doing straight psychotherapy, if you're seeing patients, if you're a psychiatrist, if it's medical, tell them what you're doing, give them the address, tell them how much space you're looking to lease, and ask them if it's an approved use. And get a zoning letter if there's any concern.
I would have never thought of that as being something to do beforehand, and how, I can't even imagine how overwhelming and frustrating that would be. Well, it's interesting because Michael and I were talking about this, is that we do know that Plantation has specific zoning. One of our friends and colleagues, Sophia Rabirosa, actually opened her practice in Plantation. And I think the building that she's in only allows a certain amount of mental health professionals. And so that's really crucial. And I think, obviously working with someone like Michael who knows these ins and outs is really essential wherever you are across the nation. And obviously some things we might be talking about specific here to the state of Florida, but obviously utilizing these tips as
as a guideline to really think about these things. Michael, what's number 4?
So number 4 is your lease term is going to go by quickly. You may sign a lease for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 1 year, 2 years. Trust me, it's going to go by quickly. Make sure you set up ahead of time that you have renewal rights. Renewal rights should be at your option, not at the landlord's option. And you should plan ahead and determine what the rental rate is going to be under that renewal right. So, for example, you may have a 5-year lease plus 3 3-year renewal options, which the tenant can exercise by giving 6 months written notice to the landlord, and rent shall be, for the first year, 3% above the prior year, or fair market rent, which is a little bit nebulous, and you have to come to some agreement in the minds at that time. But tie it up as much as you can, make it as specific as you can, or you will be caught looking for new office space when the landlord kind of holds you hostage and says, your rent's going up 15%. I have other people who want your space. If you don't like it, goodbye. Your landlord is not your friend. Your landlord is your landlord, and just treat it accordingly. Get it in writing what your rights are.
I can remember when I was signing my first lease for 5 years at this location where I just renewed a year ago, and I can't believe how fast the 5 years went. When I first was signing it, I was like, oh my gosh, 5 years is going to be the longest lease ever. But it really flew by, and it was very interesting to go through that process, and everything is negotiable. I remember negotiating the renewal rates and the percentage of increase year over year and all of that. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
There's a lot. And all of it costs money. I had a client recently come to me, a medical client, and their landlord wanted $33, $34 a square foot triple net to renew. And I said, guys, that's not market. Market is mid-20s, 26, 27. And they said, how did we get so high? And I said, look at your old lease. You had 5% annual increases. Now they want to continue that and give you a 5% increase in the renewal period. If you had done 3%, you'd probably be $3 or $4 a square foot lower. And I did an Excel spreadsheet and showed them how that compounding rate will add up. So make sure you tie those things up now, each year, and in the future in your renewal rights.
So what you're saying is if you're not good at math, have someone else do it for you?
Yes, because I am not good at math and I had somebody else do it for me.
Absolutely.
That's
My kids ask me every day, when am I ever going to use this math? And I say, trust me, you'll use the math.
For sure. Well, they'll just give it to you, Michael. They don't need it.
Maybe.
So number 5 is really important, especially for therapists.
It is. You just stole the thought right out of my head. Imagine that.
Right. What is it? I can't hear you guys.
Exactly.
No, number 5 for all of you out there listening, and hence my joke, is about soundproofing. Soundproofing your offices for psychotherapists is very important, obviously. I don't have to explain why. You need to soundproof between your waiting area and the rest of the office, and you definitely need to soundproof around each individual therapist's office. Now, the time to do that is before you move in. Time to arrange for that is when you're negotiating your lease, when you have the bargaining power, you haven't signed anything, they haven't captured you as a tenant yet, and you can tell the landlord, I'd like you to pay for the soundproofing. And this is, again, as you noted, it's a negotiating point. Just about everything in a commercial lease is open for negotiation. You don't want to go too far outside the norms of a general commercial deal, or the landlord won't take you seriously and they won't want to work with you. But you can certainly negotiate a lot of these economic points. Who pays for soundproofing? If you do it after you move in, if you realize, my goodness, the therapist next to me can hear everything my clients and I are saying, and I have to do this, well, then you have a white noise machine you can get, or you can tear apart the walls and put in some sound insulation, some sound attenuation materials, and you can drive the walls all the way up to the upper roof deck, and you can put in some sound insulation across the top of the ceiling. Very expensive. Downtime, disruptive to your office, the dust, the smell, the odor, the noise. You don't want to do it. You want to do it before you move in, and if you can get the landlord to pay for it, that would be ideal. That brings me to point number 6. Some landlords should really be avoided. I can't sit here and tell you who. I don't know where you are. I don't know what building you're looking at, but a really good local broker will know who you should not lease from. And they won't put it in writing, but they will tell you, do not go to this building. I'm warning you. I've seen people miserable there, and that will save you and your clients a lot of headaches. You don't want to be in a building where the AC goes out consistently, where vagrants hang out because they're not enforcing any kind of security, where the upkeep is not good, so the building lobby gets dirty all the time, and you don't want to be in a building where the elevator is constantly going out and you're on the 6th floor. Okay, so get some good local advice. And just to tie in one more, number 7, who pays for improvements to your office? A good landlord knows that they need to put out some money to get you into the space. The better your credit and the longer a lease you're signing, the more money you're going to get towards the build out, and you can make it look nice. You saw my wife's office. She put a little bit in, the landlord put a lot in, and it turned out very nicely.
It is.
You need to plan that all out ahead of time. You need to negotiate that before you sign your lease, how much you want them to put in. And going back to renewal rights, I often tell the landlords, if my client renews for a 5-year period, the rent is going to be, X% over the prior year, and you're going to put in new carpet and paint. That's not appropriate if you just finished a 3-year term, but if you finished a 5 or 7-year term, I want the landlord to agree right now that at a minimum they're going to recarpet and repaint, because you'd be surprised, or clean the wood floors. You'd be surprised how much wear and tear there is over 7 years. And if you get that done ahead of time, while you have the negotiating power, it's better.
Great. That's a great ninja tip. Let's move on to the next one.
Great. Number 8, and I don't say this just because I'm an attorney, this is another one, just like zoning being critical, having an attorney review your lease is crucial. It's really worth the money. You may say, I don't want to spend $500 or $1,000 now. It might be that if you don't spend that now, it'll cost you much, 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 much more later. Trust me, I've seen that happen. It's well worth the money. And if you do it, find a good commercial leasing lawyer. Don't find, the PI lawyer who is your cousin's boyfriend who says, oh, I can look at that. I've had clients, because I'm an attorney, I review my clients' leases pretty thoroughly, but I highly recommend they get a lawyer. I've had some of them say, okay, this guy is our in-house counsel, or he's, an investor in our firm. He's going to do it. And I know how to use Microsoft Word and Redline. And when I send their lawyer the lease and it comes back to me and he says, okay, here are my changes, and he made 2 changes or 0 changes, or she's barely looked at it and says, your changes are great, go ahead and send it. Makes me very nervous, guys. Get a good real estate lawyer who has office leasing experience. Let them review it and let them tell you what's good or bad in your lease. Know it all ahead of time. Doesn't mean you're going to win all the points from the landlord, but you'll go in eyes wide open. You'll know what you're getting into. It's better than not knowing.
And number 9, I think, is really important. So go ahead and share that one.
Sure. Number 9 is important, and I say it from experience because I'm a broker. Number 9 is it will not cost you more to have a broker represent you, and it could hurt you to not have a broker represent you. So understand that your landlord understands commercial real estate. You understand psychotherapy, psychology, psychiatry, mental health counseling, drug and alcohol rehab, but your landlord knows commercial real estate. You better believe they do, and their broker knows it too. So you go into this negotiation against a professional property owner who's got his best or her best interest in mind, and their broker who does not represent you. Understand they are a fiduciary representing the landlord. It's a very unlevel playing field. If you have a broker on your side, or if you happen to be a commercial property owner and have years of experience and understand how the whole game works, then you're okay. But you need a broker on your side to level the playing field. Someone who has significant experience. I don't recommend the person who sold you your house unless they're also a commercial specialist. I recommend a full-time commercial real estate broker who can come in, give you good, solid advice, has experience, represents tenants, and will guide you through the process. In the end, you will save much more than not having a broker. I can almost guarantee you. And I will tell you, a lot of people say, won't the landlord charge me more? No. When you call up and say, how much is your space? And they say it's $35 a square foot, or they have it advertised on the internet for $35 a square foot. If I call up as a broker, or you call up and say, I have a broker, how much is your space? It's still going to be $35 a square foot. They're not going to raise it. And oftentimes, most landlords that I speak to say, I'm really glad that you're in the picture, because before you got here, this particular client was asking me for outrageous, unreasonable things, and you've explained to them what's reasonable, you're keeping it in check, you're making this go much smoother, and it wouldn't have probably happened had you not been involved. That's not to pat myself on the back. That's to say that a good commercial real estate broker will guide a tenant through what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. Somebody might say, my friend got a year free on their 2-year lease. I doubt it. They were lying. They were exaggerating. Maybe somebody during the recession got a year free on a 10-year lease, but you're not going to get a year free on a 1 or 2 or 3-year lease anymore. You'll probably get, at this moment in 2017, you'll probably get 1 month per year free. And then the question is, free base rent, free gross rent? There are a lot of things that a broker adds and can make sure that you're staying within reason when you ask for it. Because again, I said earlier, if you come out of the box with your landlord and tell them all the things you want and they're all outrageous, they're going to say, I'm not dealing with this person. They're never going to get a deal done. I'm not going to waste my time.
For sure. And share with us number 10, Michael.
Number 10, if you deal with, and I have represented clients who deal with this, hardcore mental illness, the indigent, people who are coming in for their medication, alcohol rehab, drug rehab, expect some public pushback from the people in offices nearby, the people who have homes nearby. I was putting a client in a clinic into 15,000 square feet in Miami on a high floor. It required a zoning variance, and people came to the city and said, we don't want these people here. They're going to be jumping out the windows. Are you going to screw the windows shut? I mean, so many misconceptions and just outrageous things were said. And it's the classic NIMBY, not in my backyard argument, and people will come out against it. And it was really heartbreaking to see that people have these misconceptions about mental health. And the truth of the matter is, if that mental health organization was not in their neighborhood, they would have more suicides, more drug overdoses, more problems. The fact that I was bringing these people in, the client in, to provide these services was helpful. It was keeping people on the straight and narrow, it was keeping people healthier, and they should have been thankful, but they weren't. So you're really going to need a good team to help you overcome these types of objections. You're going to need a good attorney to guide you through it. Hopefully a good broker to get you with a landlord who's sympathetic to you. And I think that's number 10. That's really the last.
As you say that, I think you and I had talked. I used to actually run group homes, and we had that one issue, even though our group homes were there for a long time. But I really like your spin on that in regards to how it's actually helpful for the community. So that's a good thing, especially if you're thinking about maybe developing a drug rehab or something like that. But Michael, we really wanted to thank you for sharing these tips, and I know that they're super useful. I know that you have a resource, which is your guys' website, and that website is...
The website where you can, I'll put up a copy of this podcast as well as this memo that has my 10 points, is sflacre.com, which is short for South Florida Commercial Real Estate.com.
I was wondering, so thank you, cleared that up, which we'll also actually have that on our show notes. So perfect.
Excellent.
So Michael, we wanted to thank you so much for being a part of our podcast today. And we really hope that you, Startup Nation, that this answered some questions for you, or maybe had you thinking about some things that you might need to do as you venture into getting your own private practice building or having your group practice, whatever that is. So don't forget to check out the show notes page for all the tips, resources from today's show. Don't forget to tune in next week as we have Laura Long and her 5 secrets to a badass directory profile. We wanted to thank you so much for being part of Startup Nation. Feel free to subscribe, rate, review, share with us what you think about our podcast. It's really important. And we hope you have an awesome and inspired day. And thank you for allowing us to continue to inspire you from startup to mastery.
See you later, Startup Nation. Thanks for joining us on The Private Practice Startup. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and so much more.